My name is John McCutcheon. I'm an assistant professor in the Division of Biological Sciences at the University of Montana in Missoula. My lab studies insects and their symbiotic microorganisms. In this video abstract for the September 11, 2014 issue of Cell, we'll be discussing cicadas and their endosymbiotic bacteria. Cicadas spend most of their long lives below ground, eating sap from roots using their piercing